You're about to embark on a journey through one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, the rise of the Nazi Empire. As we delve into the early 1930s, Germany was on the brink of collapse. The economic crisis had left the nation desperate, and a young Adolf Hitler was about to seize the opportunity of a lifetime. You might be wondering how a country with such a troubled past could suddenly become a force to be reckoned with. It all starts with a man who promised to restore Germany's honor and bring prosperity to its people. Hitler's message resonated with many, and he quickly rose through the ranks of the Nazi Party. But what drove his ambition? Was it a desire for power or something more? As Hitler took the reins, Germany began to rebuild its military strength. The early 1930s saw a significant buildup of troops, tanks, and aircraft. The Nazi regime was determined to break free from the constraints of the Treaty of Versailles, which had limited Germany's military capabilities after World War I. With each passing year, the country became more aggressive, and its intentions more clear, to expand its territory and assert its dominance over Europe. Now, you might be thinking, what exactly was Hitler's plan? The answer lies in his military strategy Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. This revolutionary approach was designed to break through enemy defenses quickly and overwhelm them with speed and surprise. The core of Blitzkrieg was a harmonious blend of tanks, aircraft, and infantry working together in perfect coordination. It was a game changer, and one that would leave the world in awe. The invasion of Poland in 1939 marked the beginning of the Blitzkrieg era. Germany's fast-moving forces swept across the Polish borders, catching its opponents off guard. The Polish army, despite its bravery, was no match for the Nazi war machine. Within weeks, Poland fell, and the stage was set for the next act in this tragic drama. In the following months, Germany turned its attention to Western Europe. France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark were next on the list. The Nazi war machine rolled through these countries with ease, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The French army, in particular, was caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the Blitzkrieg. Their Maginot Line, touted as an impenetrable fortress, proved to be little more than a speed bump for the German war machine. As the Blitzkrieg swept across Europe, the psychological impact was just as significant as the military one. Morale plummeted in countries like France and Poland, who had been caught off guard by the speed and brutality of the attacks. The people of Europe were shocked, and many were left wondering how their armies could be so easily defeated. Despite its initial successes, the Blitzkrieg would eventually prove to be a double-edged sword. The relentless pace of the war took its toll on Germany's resources, and the Soviet Union's resistance in the East would prove to be a major thorn in the side of the Nazi war effort. The Battle of Britain, which raged in the skies above the English Channel, marked a turning point in the war. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, was unable to gain the upper hand, and the Blitzkrieg's momentum began to slow. As we look back on the early years of World War II, it's clear that the Blitzkrieg was a key factor in the Nazis' initial successes. The rapid tactics of tanks, air support, and infantry working together in coordination proved to be a game-changer on the battlefield. But as we've seen, the Blitzkrieg's limitations would eventually become apparent. The war would go on to become a long and grueling conflict, one that would test the mettle of nations and leave a scar on the world that would take generations to heal. As you continue on this journey through the history of World War II, remember that the events of the past are a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of understanding the complexities of human nature. The Blitzkrieg may have been a military strategy, but it was also a reflection of the values and ideals of the Nazi regime, values that would ultimately lead to its downfall. You're about to enter one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, the early days of World War II, when the Nazis unleashed a military strategy that would change the face of Europe forever. This is the story of Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that would leave countries in its path stunned and defeated. As you're about to discover, Blitzkrieg was more than just a clever name. It was a carefully crafted plan that combined speed, surprise, and overwhelming force to break through enemy defenses. But its roots went back much further, to the early 1930s, when German military strategist Heinz Guderian began to advocate for a new approach to warfare. Guderian's vision was of a combined arms force, where tanks, aircraft, and infantry worked together in perfect harmony to achieve a common goal. It was a radical idea, but one that would prove to be the key to Germany's early successes in the war. So what exactly was Blitzkrieg? In simple terms, it was a rapid and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy. The idea was to use speed and surprise to break through enemy lines, and then to use overwhelming force to crush any opposition. It was a tactic that would prove to be devastatingly effective in the early days of the war. The first major test of Blitzkrieg was the invasion of Poland in September 1939. This was a carefully planned operation, with German forces advancing rapidly across the Polish border, supported by air power and artillery. The Polish army was quickly overwhelmed, and within just a few weeks, Poland had fallen to the Nazis. But Blitzkrieg wasn't just about Poland. It was a strategy that would be used to devastating effect across Europe. In May 1940, German forces launched a surprise attack on France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, using the same tactics that had worked so well in Poland. The result was a series of quick and decisive victories as the Nazis swept across Western Europe. The invasion of France was particularly notable. A massive armored force, led by the infamous General Erwin Rommel, drove deep into French territory, leaving the French army reeling. The French had been caught off guard, and their defenses were quickly breached. But Blitzkrieg wasn't just about winning battles, it was also about winning hearts and minds. The rapid pace of the German advance left many countries in its path stunned and demoralized. The French, in particular, were shocked by the speed and brutality of the attack, and their morale began to sag. As the Nazis continued to advance, their tactics became even more sophisticated. They used deception and surprise to break through enemy lines, and they always maintained a strong air presence to support their ground forces. It was a strategy that was both brilliant and brutal, and it left many countries in its path struggling to keep up. But Blitzkrieg wasn't invincible, it had its limitations. In the Battle of Britain, the German Air Force was unable to gain the upper hand, and the Nazi strategy was forced to adapt. Similarly, in the Soviet Union, the Nazis encountered fierce resistance, and their advances were eventually brought to a halt. Despite its limitations, Blitzkrieg remains one of the most fascinating and influential military strategies of all time. Its emphasis on speed, surprise, and overwhelming force paved the way for modern warfare, and its legacy can still be seen on the battlefield today. As we move forward, you'll learn more about the complexities of Blitzkrieg and how it was used to devastating effect across Europe. But for now, let's take a moment to reflect on the early days of the war, when the Nazis unleashed a military strategy that would change the face of history forever. You're about to witness one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, the birth of Blitzkrieg, the Nazi military strategy that would change the face of Europe forever. As we delve into the early days of World War II, you'll see how Germany's lightning-fast attack caught its enemies off guard, leaving countries in a state of disarray. Imagine a military strategy that combines the brutal efficiency of tanks, the aerial superiority of aircraft, and the relentless push of infantry working together in perfect harmony. This is Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that would become the hallmark of the Nazis' early conquests. But what drove this strategy, and how did it prove to be so effective? As you're about to see, the invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, marked the first major success of Blitzkrieg. German forces, led by the Third Army under General Johannes Blaskowitz, launched a surprise attack on the western border of Poland, catching the Polish military off guard. The Polish defenses were quickly overwhelmed, and within a matter of weeks, the country was forced to surrender. But Poland was just the beginning. The Blitzkrieg strategy was designed to be adaptable, and soon Germany's fast-moving forces were attacking France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The results were nothing short of spectacular. Country after country fell before the might of the Nazi war machine. So, what made Blitzkrieg so successful? The key was its speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. German forces were able to break through enemy defenses quickly, often before the defenders even had a chance to react. This was due in large part to the coordination between tanks, aircraft, and infantry. Each component played a crucial role in the overall strategy. Imagine a fleet of Stuka dive bombers strafing enemy positions with ease, while columns of tanks thundered across the battlefield, crushing all in their path. Meanwhile, infantry units, supported by artillery and air power, pushed forward with relentless determination, refusing to yield. This was the Blitzkrieg in action, a maelstrom of steel and fire that left countries in a state of chaos. The psychological impact of Blitzkrieg was just as devastating. Countries like France and Poland were shocked by the speed and brutality of the attacks, which left their militaries and civilians reeling. The Blitzkrieg was a masterclass in psychological warfare, designed to break the enemy's will to resist. But Blitzkrieg had its limitations, and it's worth noting that its success was not without its drawbacks. As the war wore on, the Nazis would face stiff resistance from the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom, and the Blitzkrieg would no longer be the decisive factor it once was. The Battle of Britain, fought in the summer of 1940, would prove to be a turning point in the war, as the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was unable to gain air superiority over the British. In the end, Blitzkrieg proved to be a double-edged sword. It brought the Nazis rapid success in the early years of the war, but ultimately, it would be their downfall. As you continue on this journey through the history of World War II, you'll see how the Blitzkrieg strategy was adapted and refined by the Nazis, and how it ultimately contributed to their defeat. For now, let's take a step back and reflect on the Blitzkrieg's early successes. As you've just seen, this military strategy was a game-changer, a masterclass in speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. But as we move forward, we'll explore the limitations of Blitzkrieg and how it ultimately contributed to the Nazis' downfall. So, what do you think was the key to the Blitzkrieg's success? Was it the coordination between tanks, aircraft, and infantry, or was it something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation. As we move forward, we'll delve deeper into the history of World War II, exploring the strategies, tactics, and personalities that shaped the conflict. From the Battle of Britain to the D-Day landings, we'll examine the key events and decisions that led to the war's outcome. Stay tuned for more, and let's keep exploring the fascinating history of World War II. Now, let's continue our journey through the early years of the war as we examine the French invasion, a pivotal moment in the history of World War II. You're about to see how the Nazis adapted their Blitzkrieg strategy to tackle the French military, and how this battle would ultimately shape the course of the war. The French invasion, fought in May and June 1940, was a testament to the Blitzkrieg's power. German forces, led by General Heinz Guderian, launched a surprise attack on the French border, catching the French military off guard. The French defenses were quickly overwhelmed, and within a matter of weeks, the country was forced to surrender. But the French invasion was more than just a military victory, it was a strategic masterstroke. The Nazis had managed to outmaneuver the French, using their Blitzkrieg strategy to break through the French lines and exploit the weaknesses in their defenses. This was a classic example of the Blitzkrieg in action, a demonstration of the strategy's ability to adapt and evolve in the heat of battle. As we move forward, we'll explore more of the key events and decisions that shaped the war, from the Battle of Britain to the D-Day landings. We'll examine the strategies, tactics, and personalities that led to the war's outcome, and we'll explore the impact of the Blitzkrieg on the course of the conflict. But for now, let's take a moment to reflect on the French invasion. What do you think was the key to the Nazi success? Was it the coordination between tanks, aircraft, and infantry, or was it something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation. As we continue our journey through the history of World War II, we'll delve deeper into the strategies, tactics, and personalities that shaped the conflict. From the early days of the Blitzkrieg to the final victory of the Allies, we'll explore the key events and decisions that led to the war's outcome. Stay tuned for more, and let's keep exploring the fascinating history of World War II. As you stand at the threshold of the early 1940s, the world teeters on the brink of chaos. In the months leading up to World War II, Germany, under the iron-fisted rule of Adolf Hitler, had been quietly preparing for war. The year 1939 marks a pivotal moment in history as Germany, fueled by a desire to expand its territory, launches a surprise attack on Poland. This was the beginning of Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that would change the face of Europe forever. The concept of Blitzkrieg is deceptively simple, a rapid and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy. At its core, it's a coordinated effort between tanks, aircraft, and infantry, working together in perfect harmony to break through defenses quickly. This was a radical departure from traditional military strategies, which often relied on slow, methodical approaches. The invasion of Poland in 1939 marked the first major test of Blitzkrieg. German forces, comprising of panzer tanks, Stuka dive bombers, and infantry units, swept across the Polish border with ease. The Polish military, caught off guard, struggled to respond to the sheer speed and ferocity of the attack. Within weeks, Poland was overrun, and the country was divided into two zones, with the Germans controlling the majority of the territory. But Poland was just the beginning. In the spring of 1940, Germany turned its attention to Western Europe, launching a series of lightning-fast attacks on France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The French army, confident in its defensive capabilities, was caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the German assault. The Maginot Line, a supposedly impenetrable defensive barrier, was breached with ease, and the French army was quickly pushed back. The strategic and tactical brilliance of Blitzkrieg was on full display during these early battles. German commanders, led by the brilliant General Heinz Guderian, employed a range of tactics to outmaneuver their opponents. They used overwhelming speed to catch their enemies off guard, deception to conceal their intentions, and surprise to catch their opponents off balance. The result was a series of stunning victories that left the Allies reeling. But the psychological impact of Blitzkrieg was just as significant. The rapid and brutal nature of the attacks left countries like France and Poland in a state of shock. The French people, confident in their military's ability to defend the country, were stunned by the speed and ferocity of the German assault. The Polish people, already reeling from the invasion, were left to wonder if their country would ever be free from German occupation. The success of Blitzkrieg, however, was not without its limitations. In the years that followed, the Allies would adapt to the German strategy, and the tide of the war would begin to turn. The Battle of Britain, fought in the summer of 1940, marked a significant turning point in the war, as the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was unable to gain air superiority over the British Royal Air Force. The failure of Blitzkrieg in the Battle of Britain marked the beginning of the end of the German strategy, as the Allies began to push back against the Nazi occupation. As you reflect on the early years of World War II, it's clear that Blitzkrieg was a game-changer. The rapid and overwhelming nature of the attacks caught the Allies off guard, and the psychological impact of the battles was significant. But as the war dragged on, the Allies would adapt, and the tide of the war would begin to turn. The legacy of Blitzkrieg serves as a reminder of the devastating consequences of war and the importance of adaptability in the face of rapidly changing circumstances. The failure of Blitzkrieg in the Battle of Britain marked a significant turning point in the war, as the Allies began to push back against the Nazi occupation. The German strategy, which had been so successful in the early years of the war, was finally beginning to show its limitations. The Allies would continue to adapt, and the tide of the war would begin to turn in their favor. The legacy of Blitzkrieg serves as a reminder of the devastating consequences of war and the importance of adaptability in the face of rapidly changing circumstances. As you look back on the early years of World War II, it's clear that Blitzkrieg was a pivotal moment in history. The rapid and overwhelming nature of the attacks caught the Allies off guard, and the psychological impact of the battles was significant. But as the war dragged on, the Allies would adapt, and the tide of the war would begin to turn. The legacy of Blitzkrieg serves as a reminder of the devastating consequences of war and the importance of adaptability in the face of rapidly changing circumstances. You're standing at the threshold of a pivotal moment in modern history. The year is 1939, and Germany, under the iron-fisted rule of Adolf Hitler, is preparing for war. The strategy is clear: expand European territory at any cost. But what sets this war apart from others? It's the concept of Blitzkrieg, lightning war, a rapid and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy. Hitler's vision was to break through defenses quickly, using a combination of tanks, aircraft, and infantry working together in coordination. The goal was to create a swift and decisive victory, catching the enemy off guard before they could react. It was a bold plan, one that would change the face of Europe forever. The role of air power in Blitzkrieg was crucial. German aircraft, including dive bombers and fighter planes, provided close air support and reconnaissance, allowing the military to pinpoint enemy positions and launch targeted attacks. The Stuka dive bomber, with its distinctive screaming sound, became an iconic symbol of Blitzkrieg, striking fear into enemy hearts. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 marked the first major test of Blitzkrieg. German forces, armed with the latest tanks and aircraft, swept across the border, overwhelming the Polish military with speed and precision. The Polish army, caught off guard, was unable to respond effectively to the rapid onslaught. Within weeks, Poland had fallen, and the Blitzkrieg had claimed its first major victory. The success of Blitzkrieg was not limited to Poland. In May 1940, German forces turned their attention to Western Europe, invading France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The speed and brutality of the attacks caught the enemy off guard, and soon, country after country was falling to the Blitzkrieg. The tactics used by the Nazis were a key factor in their success. Overwhelming speed, deception, and surprise allowed them to break through enemy defenses quickly, catching the enemy off balance. The use of tanks, aircraft, and infantry in coordination created a powerful and unstoppable force, one that the enemy was unable to counter. The psychological impact of Blitzkrieg was significant. Countries like France and Poland, which had been confident in their military strength, were shocked by the speed and brutality of the attacks. Morale plummeted, and soon, entire armies were in disarray. The Blitzkrieg had created a sense of chaos and disorder, one that would take years to recover from. But Blitzkrieg was not invincible. As the war dragged on, the Nazis faced increasing resistance from the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom. The Battle of Britain, fought in the skies above England, marked a significant turning point in the war. The British, with their superior air power, were able to repel the German air attacks, dealing a major blow to the Blitzkrieg strategy. Despite its initial successes, Blitzkrieg would ultimately prove to be a limited strategy. It was designed to achieve rapid victories, but it was not a sustainable approach to war. The Blitzkrieg's failure to secure a long-term victory marked a significant shift in the war's trajectory, one that would ultimately lead to the downfall of the Nazi regime. As you reflect on the Blitzkrieg, remember the power of speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. These tactics, combined with a clear strategy and coordination, can achieve remarkable results in the heat of battle. But as the Nazis discovered, it's a short-term solution, one that eventually leads to exhaustion and defeat. The Blitzkrieg may have changed the face of Europe, but it also marked the beginning of the end for the Nazi regime. You're now left with a crucial question. What can we learn from the Blitzkrieg? How can we apply its tactics and strategies to our own lives, whether in business, sports, or personal endeavors? The answer lies in the power of focus, coordination, and execution. By understanding the Blitzkrieg's strengths and weaknesses, we can develop our own strategies for success, ones that will propel us forward in the face of adversity. As we move forward, we'll explore more about the Blitzkrieg's impact on World War II, the key players involved, and the lessons we can learn from this pivotal moment in history. But for now, take a step back and reflect on the Blitzkrieg's significance. How did this strategy, born in the early 1930s, shape the course of World War II, and what can we learn from its successes and failures? The answers lie ahead in the next chapter of this epic story. You're standing at the threshold of a pivotal moment in history. The year is 1939, and Germany, under the iron-fisted rule of Adolf Hitler, is preparing for war. The strategy is clear: expand European territory at any cost. But what sets this war apart from others? It's the concept of Blitzkrieg, a lightning-fast and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy. You probably know that Blitzkrieg translates to lightning war in German, but do you know what made it so effective? The key to Blitzkrieg's success lies in the innovative tactics employed by German commanders. They mastered the art of rapid flanking maneuvers, where tanks, aircraft, and infantry worked together in perfect coordination to break through defenses quickly. Imagine being a Polish soldier, stationed along the border with Germany, only to find yourself surrounded by an unstoppable force. The German army's speed and precision caught the Polish military off guard, and within weeks, Poland fell to the Nazis. This was just the beginning of a series of rapid conquests that would change the course of history. In May 1940, Germany launched a surprise attack on France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The German forces moved at an unprecedented speed, catching their enemies off balance and leaving them scrambling to respond. The French army, in particular, was unprepared for the ferocity and speed of the attack, and within weeks, they too had fallen to the Nazis. So, what made Blitzkrieg so successful? The answer lies in the strategic and tactical brilliance of the German commanders. They employed decoy units and fake radio transmissions to mislead enemy forces, creating confusion and chaos on the battlefield. They also used their speed and surprise to their advantage, attacking before the enemy could even react. The effect on morale in countries like France and Poland was devastating. The speed and brutality of the attacks left many soldiers and civilians in shock, wondering how they could have been so quickly and easily defeated. The psychological impact of Blitzkrieg was profound, and it would take years for the world to recover from the trauma inflicted by the Nazis. But Blitzkrieg's success was not without its limitations. As the war dragged on, the German army found itself facing increasingly determined resistance from the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom. The Battle of Britain, fought in the skies above England in 1940, marked a turning point in the war, as the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was unable to gain the upper hand. Despite its initial success, Blitzkrieg could not secure a long-term victory for the Nazis. The strategy, while revolutionary, was ultimately based on a false premise that speed and surprise could overcome any opposition. As the war wore on, the German army found itself bogged down in a series of bloody and costly battles, and the Blitzkrieg's momentum was lost. In conclusion, the Blitzkrieg was a military strategy that changed the face of modern warfare. Its innovative tactics and speed caught the world off guard, and its success was a testament to the ingenuity and cunning of the German commanders. However, as the war dragged on, the limitations of Blitzkrieg became clear, and it ultimately failed to secure a lasting victory for the Nazis. You're standing in the heart of Europe, 1939. The world is on the brink of chaos, and the fate of the continent hangs in the balance. Adolf Hitler's Germany is preparing for war, with a strategy that will shake the very foundations of military thinking. This is Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that will change the face of Europe forever. Imagine yourself as a soldier on the front lines, facing an enemy that's been caught off guard. The year is 1939, and the invasion of Poland is just beginning. German forces, armed with tanks, aircraft, and infantry, are working in perfect coordination to break through the enemy's defenses. The speed and ferocity of the attack are unlike anything the world has ever seen before. As the Blitzkrieg advances, the enemy is left reeling. The Polish army, caught off balance, struggles to respond to the rapid onslaught. The same fate awaits the French, Belgian, Dutch, and Danish armies as German forces pour across their borders. The Blitzkrieg is a masterclass in speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. But what makes this strategy so effective? It's not just the tanks, aircraft, and infantry that work together in perfect harmony. It's the deception, the misdirection, and the element of surprise that leaves the enemy wondering what hit them. The Blitzkrieg is a puzzle that's been carefully crafted to outmaneuver the enemy at every turn. Take, for example, the invasion of France. German forces, led by the brilliant General Heinz Guderian, use a combination of tanks, aircraft, and infantry to break through the French defenses. The French army, caught off guard, is unable to respond effectively to the rapid onslaught. The result is a series of crushing defeats that leave the French reeling. But the Blitzkrieg is not just a military strategy, it's also a psychological one. The rapid and brutal nature of the attack shocks and demoralizes the enemy, creating a sense of panic and disorder. The speed and efficiency of the German advances create a sense of chaos, leaving the enemy struggling to respond. As the Blitzkrieg continues to roll across Europe, the enemy is left stunned and disoriented. The French, in particular, are shocked by the speed and ferocity of the attack. The Polish army, already reeling from the initial invasion, is unable to respond effectively to the rapid onslaught. But the Blitzkrieg is not invincible. As the war drags on, the enemy begins to adapt and respond. The Battle of Britain, fought in the skies above England, marks a turning point in the war. German forces, unable to secure air superiority, are forced to abandon their plans for an invasion of the UK. The Blitzkrieg, although initially successful, is ultimately unable to secure a long-term victory. The enemy, having learned from their mistakes, begins to adapt and respond more effectively to the rapid onslaught. The Blitzkrieg, once a game-changer, becomes a relic of the past, a reminder of the dangers of underestimating the enemy. As you stand in the heart of Europe, 1939, you're witnessing a moment in history that will be remembered for generations to come. The Blitzkrieg, a strategy that was once hailed as revolutionary, is now a cautionary tale of the dangers of military overconfidence. The world is a complex and unpredictable place, and even the most brilliant military strategies can be undone by the enemy's adaptability and determination. The Blitzkrieg may have been a lightning war, but it was also a war of ideas, a clash of cultures and values that would shape the course of history. As you reflect on the events of 1939, you're reminded of the importance of adaptability, creativity, and determination in the face of adversity. The Blitzkrieg may have been a military strategy, but it's also a reminder of the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most daunting challenges. As you continue your journey through the history of World War II, you'll encounter many more stories of bravery, sacrifice, and determination. But for now, let's remember the Blitzkrieg, a strategy that changed the face of Europe forever. A strategy that may have been successful in the short term, but ultimately failed to secure a long-term victory. A reminder of the importance of learning from our mistakes and adapting to the changing circumstances of war. You're standing at the threshold of a pivotal moment in history. The year is 1939, and Germany, under the iron-fisted rule of Adolf Hitler, is preparing for war. The strategy is clear. Expand European territory at any cost. But what sets this war apart from others? It's the concept of Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that will shake the very foundations of military thinking. Imagine a battlefield where tanks, aircraft, and infantry work together in perfect harmony, a symphony of steel and fire that breaks through defenses with unprecedented speed. This is Blitzkrieg, a tactic that will leave its enemies stunned and reeling. The Nazis were masters of this approach, and their early successes would be nothing short of breathtaking. Let's start with the invasion of Poland in September 1939. The Polish military was no match for the German Blitzkrieg, with its lightning-fast panzers and Stuka dive bombers. The Polish army was quickly overrun, and the country was forced to surrender within just a few weeks. This was a harbinger of things to come, as the Nazis set their sights on France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The attacks on these countries were swift and merciless, with the German military using its Blitzkrieg tactics to devastating effect. The French military, in particular, was caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the German onslaught. They had been preparing for a traditional war, not a rapid and overwhelming attack that would leave them scrambling to keep up. The key to Blitzkrieg's success lay in its use of speed, deception, and surprise. The German military would often fake withdrawals or feint attacks to lure their enemies into a false sense of security, only to strike with deadly precision when they least expected it. This approach left their opponents reeling, unable to respond effectively to the sudden and ferocious onslaught. As the Blitzkrieg rolled across Europe, the psychological impact was just as significant as the military one. The French and Polish people were shocked and demoralized by the speed and brutality of the attacks. They had never seen anything like it before, and the trauma would take years to heal. The Blitzkrieg was not just a military tactic. It was a psychological assault on the very fabric of these nations. But Blitzkrieg's success was not without its limitations. As the Nazis continued to push deeper into Europe, they began to face increasing resistance from the French and British armies. The Battle of Britain, which raged from July to October 1940, marked a turning point in the war. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was unable to gain a decisive advantage over the British RAF, and the Blitzkrieg's momentum began to falter. The Soviet Union, too, would soon prove to be a thorn in the side of the Nazis. As the German army pushed deeper into Eastern Europe, they encountered a fierce and determined resistance from the Soviet military. The Soviet Union would eventually join forces with the Allies to turn the tide of the war, and the Blitzkrieg would be forced to adapt to a new and more determined enemy. In hindsight, it's clear that Blitzkrieg was a tactic that was unsustainable in the long term. The Nazis had relied too heavily on speed and surprise, and their enemies had eventually adapted to their approach. The Battle of Britain and Soviet resistance marked a turning point in the war, and the Blitzkrieg would never again be the same. As you look back on this pivotal moment in history, you can't help but wonder what might have been if the Nazis had not relied so heavily on Blitzkrieg. Would they have been able to win the war without it? Or would they have found an even more devastating approach to conquer Europe? These questions will haunt historians for generations to come. The Blitzkrieg may have been a brilliant tactic, but it was also a fleeting one. Its limitations would eventually become clear, and the Nazis would be forced to adapt to a new and more challenging enemy. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in history, we're reminded that even the most brilliant strategies can be undone by the passage of time and the determination of their opponents. You're standing in the heart of Europe, 1939. The world is on the brink of chaos, and the fate of the continent hangs in the balance. Adolf Hitler's Germany is preparing for war, with a strategy that will shake the very foundations of military thinking. This is Blitzkrieg, the lightning war, a rapid and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy. Imagine tanks, aircraft, and infantry working together in coordination to break through defenses quickly. The idea was simple: use speed, surprise, and overwhelming force to outmaneuver and defeat the enemy before they even had a chance to react. It was a strategy born out of desperation, but one that would prove to be incredibly effective in the early years of World War II. The first major test of Blitzkrieg came in September 1939 with the invasion of Poland. Germany's fast-moving forces quickly defeated the Polish army, and the country was forced to surrender just weeks later. But Poland was just the beginning. Over the next few months, Germany launched a series of lightning-fast attacks on France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The results were nothing short of spectacular. Country after country was quickly overrun, and the Nazi army seemed unstoppable. The French army, in particular, was caught off guard by the speed and brutality of the German attacks. The psychological impact was devastating, with morale plummeting and the government struggling to respond to the crisis. But what made Blitzkrieg so effective? It was a combination of clever tactics and strategic brilliance. German commanders used deception and surprise to mask their true intentions, and their forces moved with lightning speed to catch their enemies off guard. The use of air power was also crucial, with German aircraft providing close air support to the ground troops and helping to break through enemy defenses. As the Blitzkrieg rolled across Europe, the Nazi army seemed invincible, but behind the scenes, there were signs of trouble. The Soviet Union was beginning to mobilize its own forces, and the British were starting to develop a strategy to counter the German air threat. The Battle of Britain, which would take place in the summer of 1940, would mark a significant turning point in the war. For the first time, the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, faced a determined and well-prepared enemy. The British Royal Air Force, RAF, put up a fierce resistance, and the Luftwaffe was ultimately repelled. The failure to gain air superiority over Britain exposed the limitations of Blitzkrieg, and the momentum of the war began to shift. The Battle of Britain marked a crucial turning point in the war, as Germany's momentum was halted. The Blitzkrieg, which had been so successful in the early years of the war, was no longer able to secure a long-term victory. The Nazi army would continue to fight on, but the tide of the war was beginning to turn against them. As we look back on the Blitzkrieg, it's clear that this was a military strategy that was ahead of its time. The use of speed, surprise, and overwhelming force to defeat the enemy was a brilliant idea, but one that ultimately had its limitations. The failure of Blitzkrieg in the Battle of Britain marked the beginning of the end of Germany's dominance on the battlefield and paved the way for the ultimate defeat of the Nazi army. But what can we learn from the Blitzkrieg? How can we apply the lessons of this military strategy to our own lives? The answer lies in the power of speed, surprise, and innovation. By thinking outside the box and pushing the boundaries of what's possible, we can achieve great things. But we must also be aware of the limitations of our own strategy and be prepared to adapt and evolve as circumstances change. The Blitzkrieg may have been a military strategy, but its lessons are timeless and universal. It's a reminder that the power of innovation and creativity can be a powerful force for change, but that it must be balanced with caution and prudence. As we move forward into an uncertain future, let us remember the lessons of the Blitzkrieg and strive to be bold, yet cautious, in our pursuit of greatness. You're standing at the threshold of a pivotal moment in history, September 1939. The world is on the brink of chaos, and the fate of Europe hangs in the balance. Adolf Hitler's Germany, with its iron-fisted rule, is preparing for war. The strategy is clear: expand European territory at any cost. But what sets this war apart from others? It's the concept of Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that will shake the very foundations of military thinking. Imagine a battlefield where tanks, aircraft, and infantry work together in perfect coordination to break through enemy defenses. This is the essence of Blitzkrieg, a rapid and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy. The Nazis had been perfecting this strategy, and the early signs were ominous. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. The Polish army, unprepared for such a rapid attack, was quickly overwhelmed. The invasion was a masterclass in Blitzkrieg tactics: speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. The Polish Air Force was destroyed in a matter of days, and the army was forced to retreat. The invasion was a mere 30 days old when Poland surrendered, but the Blitzkrieg didn't stop there. Next, Germany turned its attention to Western Europe. In May 1940, the invasion of France began. The French army, confident in its defenses, was caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the German attack. The Nazis used their tanks to break through the French lines, while their air force provided relentless air support. The French army was quickly pushed back, and the country was forced to surrender. The Blitzkrieg continued its rampage, invading Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. Each country fell swiftly, caught off guard by the Nazis' rapid and overwhelming attacks. The psychological impact on the populations was devastating. Shock, fear, and despair gripped the people as they realized the speed and brutality of the Nazis' tactics. The Blitzkrieg's strategic and tactical brilliance cannot be overstated. The key to its success lay in the Nazis' ability to deceive and mislead their enemies. By creating a false sense of security, they could launch a surprise attack, catching their opponents off guard. This, combined with the overwhelming force of their military, made it nearly impossible for their enemies to resist. But as the Blitzkrieg continued, cracks began to appear in the Nazis' armor. The Battle of Britain, fought in the skies above the UK, marked a significant turning point in the war. The Nazis' air force, the Luftwaffe, was unable to gain the upper hand against the British, and their plans to invade the UK were foiled. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, had been watching the Nazis' Blitzkrieg with growing concern. In June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. The Soviet army, determined to resist German aggression, fought back with ferocity. The Battle of Stalingrad, fought from August 1942 to February 1943, marked a significant turning point in the war. The Soviet army, led by General Zhukov, was able to push the Germans back, and the city was eventually retaken. The eventual invasion of Germany by Soviet forces in 1944 spelled the end of Blitzkrieg as a viable war strategy. The Nazis' rapid and overwhelming attacks had been matched by the Soviets' determination and resilience. The Blitzkrieg, which had once seemed unstoppable, was finally brought to its knees. As we look back on the Blitzkrieg, we can see its limitations. While it was initially successful, it could not secure a long-term victory. The Nazis' failure to defeat the Soviet Union, combined with their defeat in the Battle of Britain, marked the beginning of the end of Blitzkrieg's effectiveness. The Blitzkrieg, a strategy that had once seemed so brilliant, was ultimately unable to deliver the results that Hitler had promised. You're standing in the heart of Europe, 1939. The world is on the brink of chaos, and the fate of the continent hangs in the balance. Adolf Hitler's Germany is preparing for war, with a strategy that will shake the very foundations of military thinking. As you prepare to delve into the lessons of Blitzkrieg, let's take a closer look at how this lightning-fast approach revolutionized warfare. You might be wondering what made Blitzkrieg so effective. The answer lies in its emphasis on speed, surprise, and combined arms warfare. The term Blitzkrieg, which translates to lightning war, was coined to describe the rapid and overwhelming attack designed to catch the enemy off guard. It was a radical departure from traditional military strategies, where slow and methodical advances were the norm. Imagine a battlefield where tanks, aircraft, and infantry work together in perfect harmony. This is the essence of Blitzkrieg. By coordinating their efforts, these forces could break through enemy defenses with ease, leaving the opposition reeling. The invasion of Poland in 1939 marked the first significant test of Blitzkrieg tactics. Germany's forces, with their lightning-fast advances, quickly overwhelmed the Polish military, which was caught flat-footed and ill-prepared for such a rapid attack. The success of Blitzkrieg didn't stop there. Germany's next target was France, which was caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the attack. The Germans quickly breached the French defenses, and the country soon fell to occupation. Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark followed suit, each succumbing to the Blitzkrieg's overwhelming force. So what made Blitzkrieg so effective? It's simple: speed, surprise, and coordination. By catching the enemy off guard, the Germans were able to exploit weaknesses in their defenses and gain a decisive advantage. This approach was a masterclass in tactical brilliance, and it's an approach that still influences modern military tactics to this day. But Blitzkrieg's impact extends beyond the battlefield. Its psychological impact on enemy forces was significant, leaving countries like France and Poland reeling from the shock and brutality of the attacks. The speed and ferocity of the Blitzkrieg left opponents demoralized, unsure of how to respond to such a rapid and overwhelming onslaught. Of course, Blitzkrieg's success was not without its limitations. As the war dragged on, the Germans found themselves facing more determined and better prepared opponents, who had learned from the lessons of the Blitzkrieg's early successes. The Battle of Britain and Soviet resistance marked a turning point, where the Blitzkrieg's effectiveness began to wane. Despite its limitations, Blitzkrieg remains an important chapter in the history of warfare. Its emphasis on speed, surprise, and coordination has influenced military tactics for generations, and its psychological impact on enemy forces is still studied by military strategists today. As you reflect on the lessons of Blitzkrieg, remember that even the most effective military strategies have limitations, and adaptability and innovation remain essential for success in the face of an evolving battlefield. You're standing in the midst of a pivotal moment in history, September 1939. Germany, under the iron-fisted rule of Adolf Hitler, is preparing for war. The strategy is clear: expand European territory at any cost. This is the story of Blitzkrieg, the Nazi strategy that would change the face of warfare forever. Imagine being part of an army that can strike with lightning speed, catching your enemies off guard and leaving them reeling. This is what Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, was all about: a rapid and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy. It was a game-changer in military strategy, and one that would have far-reaching consequences. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 marked the beginning of the Blitzkrieg era. Germany's fast-moving forces, comprising tanks, aircraft, and infantry working together in coordination, broke through Polish defenses with ease. The speed and brutality of the attack left the Polish army reeling, and within weeks, Germany had gained control of the country. But the Blitzkrieg didn't stop there. In May 1940, Germany turned its attention to Western Europe, unleashing a devastating attack on France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The results were the same: rapid and overwhelming victories, with countries unable to withstand the ferocity of the Nazi onslaught. The key to the Blitzkrieg's success lay in its tactics. Speed, deception, and surprise were the hallmarks of this strategy. German forces would often disguise their intentions, using false radio transmissions and feints to deceive their enemies. Meanwhile, their tanks and aircraft would move with lightning speed, catching the enemy off guard and leaving them struggling to respond. The psychological impact of the Blitzkrieg was just as significant as its military one. Countries like France and Poland were shocked by the speed and brutality of the attacks, leaving their citizens reeling and morale in tatters. The Blitzkrieg was a masterclass in psychological warfare, using fear and intimidation to break the enemy's will to resist. But as we know, the Blitzkrieg's success was not sustainable. The Battle of Britain in 1940 marked a turning point in the war, as the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was unable to gain control of the skies. Meanwhile, Soviet resistance on the Eastern Front would eventually prove too great for the Nazi army to overcome. In the end, the Blitzkrieg may have been a brilliant strategy, but it was ultimately a flawed one. It relied on speed and surprise, but it couldn't secure a long-term victory. As the war dragged on, the Allies would adapt and evolve, developing new tactics and strategies to counter the Blitzkrieg's effectiveness. And yet, the legacy of the Blitzkrieg lives on. Its impact can be seen in modern-day conflicts, where speed and surprise remain key components of military strategy. The psychological impact of rapid and brutal attacks continues to be a concern, and the importance of diplomacy and international cooperation has never been more pressing. As we reflect on the Blitzkrieg, we're reminded of the importance of understanding the past. By studying the tactics and strategies of this pivotal moment in history, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of warfare and the human cost of conflict. You're now standing at the threshold of a new understanding, one that will take you on a journey through the complexities of war and the human experience. Join us next time as we continue to explore the impact of the Blitzkrieg on global politics and the lessons we can learn from this pivotal moment in history. As you stand in the heart of Europe, 1939, the air is electric with tension. Adolf Hitler's Germany is on the move, and the fate of the continent hangs in the balance. You're about to witness the birth of a new kind of warfare, one that will leave a lasting impact on the world. This is the story of Blitzkrieg, the Nazi strategy that would change the face of modern warfare forever. You're about to enter a world of rapid-fire attacks, where speed and surprise are the ultimate weapons. The term Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, refers to a coordinated assault by tanks, aircraft, and infantry working together in perfect harmony. The goal is to break through enemy defenses quickly, before they can even react. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, marking the beginning of the Blitzkrieg era. The invasion was a masterclass in speed and deception. German forces swept in from multiple directions, catching the Polish military off guard. The Polish army was no match for the Blitzkrieg's lightning-fast pace, and within weeks, the country had fallen. But Poland was just the beginning. In May 1940, Germany turned its attention to Western Europe, invading France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The outcome was the same: rapid and brutal victories that left the enemy reeling. The French army, in particular, was caught off guard by the Blitzkrieg's speed and ferocity. So, what made the Blitzkrieg so effective? The key to its success lay in its tactical brilliance. German forces used overwhelming speed, deception, and surprise to catch their enemies off guard. They would often feint attacks in one direction, while launching a massive assault in another. This created chaos and confusion among the enemy ranks, making it impossible for them to respond effectively. The psychological impact of the Blitzkrieg was just as devastating. The speed and brutality of the attacks left many countries in a state of shock. The French army, in particular, was demoralized by the Blitzkrieg's rapid success. They had never seen anything like it before, and it took them by surprise. But the Blitzkrieg's limitations soon became apparent. Although initially successful, it could not secure a long-term victory. The Battle of Britain, which raged from July to October 1940, marked a turning point in the war. The British Air Force, led by Winston Churchill, put up a fierce resistance against the German Luftwaffe, and the Blitzkrieg's air component was severely depleted. As the war raged on, the Blitzkrieg's effectiveness began to wane. The Soviet Union, in particular, proved to be a formidable opponent, using its vast resources and manpower to drive the German army back. The Blitzkrieg's limitations were finally exposed, and the strategy that had once seemed so invincible began to falter. As you reflect on the Blitzkrieg's legacy, you're left with a sense of awe and respect for the military strategists who devised it. Their innovative approach to warfare changed the face of modern conflict, leaving a lasting impact on the world. But you're also reminded of the devastating human cost of war and the importance of remembering the lessons of history. The Blitzkrieg may have been a brilliant military strategy, but it was also a reminder of the horrors of war. As you watch the world unfold, remember the impact of Blitzkrieg on the people who lived through it. Remember the soldiers who fought and died, the civilians who suffered, and the leaders who made the impossible decisions. The Blitzkrieg may be a thing of the past, but its legacy lives on. As you look to the future, remember the importance of understanding the past and the lessons that it can teach us. The Blitzkrieg may have been a lightning-fast attack, but its impact will be felt for generations to come. You're standing in the midst of a pivotal moment in history, September 1939. Germany, under the iron-fisted rule of Adolf Hitler, is preparing for war. The strategy is clear: expand European territory at any cost. This is the story of Blitzkrieg, the Nazi strategy that would change the face of modern warfare. Imagine you're a soldier on the front lines, facing an enemy that's unlike anything you've ever seen before. The Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, is a rapid and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy. It's a combination of tanks, aircraft, and infantry working together in coordination to break through defenses quickly. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 marked the beginning of this new kind of warfare. Germany's fast-moving forces quickly defeated the Polish army, demonstrating the effectiveness of Blitzkrieg tactics. But it wasn't just Poland. France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark all fell to the Nazi onslaught in 1940. The speed and brutality of these attacks left the enemy reeling. Morale plummeted as countries struggled to comprehend the scale and ferocity of the Blitzkrieg. The French army, in particular, was caught off guard, with its traditional defensive tactics proving no match for the Nazis' lightning-fast assault. So what made Blitzkrieg so effective? The key to its success lay in its emphasis on speed, deception, and surprise. By using air support to soften up enemy defenses and then following up with a rapid infantry advance, the Nazis were able to catch their opponents off guard. The element of surprise was crucial, as the enemy was often unable to respond effectively to the Blitzkrieg's rapid pace. But Blitzkrieg wasn't just a tactical innovation, it was also a psychological one. The sheer speed and ferocity of the attacks left a lasting impact on the enemy, eroding morale and creating a sense of hopelessness. The Nazis were masters of exploiting this psychological vulnerability, using their Blitzkrieg tactics to break the will of their opponents. Of course, Blitzkrieg's limitations soon became apparent. The Battle of Britain in 1940 marked a turning point in the war, as the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was unable to gain air superiority over the British. The Soviet Union also proved to be a formidable opponent, its vast resources and industrial might eventually wearing down the Nazi war machine. In the end, Blitzkrieg could not secure a long-term victory, despite its initial successes. But its impact on modern warfare cannot be overstated. The emphasis on speed, combined arms warfare, and psychological manipulation has influenced military tactics to this day. As a soldier, a strategist, or simply a student of history, it's essential to understand the lessons of Blitzkrieg and how they continue to shape the face of modern warfare. As you stand in the midst of a pivotal moment in history, September 1939, Germany, under the iron-fisted rule of Adolf Hitler, is preparing for war. The strategy is clear: expand European territory at any cost. This is the story of Blitzkrieg, the Nazi strategy that would change the face of modern warfare. You've witnessed the human cost and the lasting impact, but what's the importance of understanding Blitzkrieg? Understanding the history and tactics of Blitzkrieg provides valuable insights into modern warfare. The rapid and overwhelming attack designed to surprise and incapacitate the enemy was a masterstroke of military strategy. It was a lightning war, where tanks, aircraft, and infantry worked together in coordination to break through defenses quickly. The invasion of Poland in 1939 was the first major test of Blitzkrieg, and it set the tone for the rapid victories that followed. In just a few weeks, Germany's fast-moving forces had defeated Poland, and then turned their attention to France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. These countries, caught off guard, were no match for the Blitzkrieg's speed and ferocity. The French military, in particular, was shocked by the rapid attack, and their defenses were quickly breached. The psychological impact on the French people was devastating, and it would take them years to recover from the trauma of the Blitzkrieg. The key to Blitzkrieg's success lay in its tactics. The Nazis used overwhelming speed, deception, and surprise to catch their enemies off guard. They struck quickly and with precision, using their air power to soften up enemy defenses before sending in their tanks and infantry. The result was a series of rapid victories that left their opponents reeling. But Blitzkrieg was not invincible. Its limitations were soon to be exposed, particularly in the Battle of Britain, where the Nazis' air power was matched by the determination of the British people. The failure of Blitzkrieg in later years was a testament to the adaptability of their enemies and the limitations of the Nazi strategy. As you reflect on the Blitzkrieg, you're left with a lasting impression of its impact on modern warfare. The rapid and overwhelming attack may have seemed like a game-changer in the early years of World War II, but it ultimately proved to be a fleeting success. The importance of understanding Blitzkrieg lies in its lessons for modern warfare. It's a reminder that even the most successful military strategies can have limitations, and that adaptability and flexibility are key to long-term success. So, what can we learn from the Blitzkrieg? How can we apply its lessons to modern-day conflicts? These are questions that you'll continue to ponder as you delve deeper into the history of World War II. But for now, take a step back and reflect on the Blitzkrieg's significance. Was it a game changer or a fleeting success? The answer, like the Blitzkrieg itself, is complex and multifaceted.